In addition to creating the first illustration of Star Wars spacecraft, Colin Cantwell also created a series of models to fully dimensionalize the vehicles. He used a technique known as kit bashing, in which a model builder constructs a unique design using parts from multiple existing model kits. This technique was utilized in the final filming miniatures as well. The Millennium Falcon, or Star Destroyers, will reveal pieces of Panzer tanks and hot rod engines. Cantwell would buy dozens of various model kits and pick through them for the detailed parts he was most interested in, collecting them in empty boxes. This box is the actual one he selected parts from to create the very first Star Wars vehicle models to ever exist. The next plinth features a reproduction of the cast pieces ILM model makers used to build the final filming miniatures of the X-Wings. Although kit bashing was used to create many of the details, the majority of this model was scratch-built using stock aluminum, wood, styrene plastic, and plexiglass. Because there were multiple X-Wings to be filmed, as well as stunt versions that would be filled with pyrotechnics to explode on camera, the original one-of-a-kind pieces of this model was molded in silicone rubber, and reproductions were cast in urethane plastic. In 1974, while George Lucas was first writing the Star Wars, science fiction films still had a stigma left over from the campy special effects techniques used in the 50s and the 60s. The young director wanted to take a new approach, both in how his starships looked and how they were filmed. Impressed with the futuristic work done on 2001: A Space Odyssey, Lucas contacted artist Colin Cantwell to create some preliminary designs to help him sell his vision. The following sketches are from a collection of the first ever done for Star Wars based on Cantwell's initial conversations with Lucas. He was tasked with designing the Death Star, Star Destroyers, the Sandcrawler, the TIE Fighter, the Millennium Falcon, and the Rebel Fighters, which Cantwell decided to call X-Wings and Y-Wings. Although these are just rough ideas and very different from the final designs, you can clearly see stylistic elements that followed through to the finished film. After cementing a concept for each craft, Cantwell produced various color illustrations of the spaceships in action. Colin states that his inspiration for the X-Wing were a throwing dart and a dragster. The Star Destroyers were based on aircraft carriers, and Lucas requested that the TIE Fighters have solar cells to charge their twin-ion engines. After reading the script, Cantwell believed his main mission was to create distinct visual cues for the audience to be able to instantly distinguish the good guys from the bad guys during the intricate dogfight-style battles the director had planned. The Hollywood Art Museum does not yet have an actual screen-used shooting miniature of an X-Wing in our collection, but this icon's reproduction was a gift from Lucasfilm in the mid-90s. It is highly accurate and shows how all the elements came together to create the final X-Wing we all know and love. This completed model demonstrates one of the key elements that made the Star Wars design so believable. The artist chose to distress everything, painting sets, props, and vehicles with textures and stains to make them appear aged and used. This separated Lucas's galaxy from the clean, toy-like worlds of Flash Gordon, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and other popular sci-fi at the time. Colin Cantwell's design went to the Industrial Light and Magic Art Department, where they were refined by illustrators Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston. The result of their work was then distributed to the model makers at ILM and the art department at Elstree Studios in England. There, set designers worked up plans to build the full-sized X-Wing for the hangar scenes. All parties went back and forth to find a design that was achievable in all mediums. These drafted plans represent an early pass from Elstree. So early, in fact, that the crew was not yet familiar with the now nomenclature for the X-Wing. Note the spelling in the title block. Costume designer John Moyo was also hugely responsible for cementing Star Wars in reality. Shedding the preconceived notions of silver spandex suits and bubble-headed helmets, Moyo pulled his expertise in military uniforms to create the Oscar award-winning look for Star Wars. His philosophy was the audience shouldn't notice the costumes, so he worked within very familiar styles of attire while still adding a hint of futuristic flair. Once he was satisfied with the costume style for a particular character, he would photocopy his line art and do multiple color renderings until he found the combination that worked best. Other artists contribute to the costumes of Star Wars, including Joe Johnston. This collection shows some of Johnston's concepts for the citizens of Clow City and Empire Strikes Back. Note the literal stamps of approval from George Lucas. Phil Tippett created some of the earliest designs for the extraterrestrial patrons of the Mos Eisley Cantina. His sketch of the Duros alien demonstrates the planning of proportion to a human head prior to sculpting the mask. Joe Johnston also contributed to the alien inhabitants of the Star Wars galaxy. This selection of sketches includes early concepts for Empire Strikes Back, including Yoda, the Ugnaughts, and Wampas. Hundreds of drawings were done for every element of the Star Wars franchise, as you can see by the numbers next to the signatures. Only months after the initial release of Star Wars, Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie were tasked with creating new designs for a sequel. One of the first projects was new armor for an Imperial super soldier. Working from the Japanese samurai armor reference that initially influenced some of the Darth Vader helmet choices, Johnston started to develop a design that would ultimately be chosen for the rogue bounty hunter, Boba Fett. At first glance, you might think that these drawings are of Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar from the 2016 film Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Although they are indeed Vader's castle, they were actually drawn by Joe Johnston in 1978 when The Empire Strikes Back script included scenes on Mustafar. These were ultimately cut before filming started. Not only was illustrator Ralph McQuarrie responsible for helping to mold the overall conceptual look for Star Wars, he also contributed many amazing works actually seen in the film in the form of matte paintings. These were highly realistic paintings used to extend a set within a shot, add a planet in the sky, or create a background that couldn't exist in real life. They were usually so expertly painted that the audience had no idea what they were looking at wasn't real. And Ralph was one of the best. This series of sketches are the scarce remains of his prep work for some of those amazing paintings. You can see his ideas for some skyline buildings on Bespin, a sky ridge, the underside of Cloud City, and a set extension to make the corridor Luke and R2 were traveling down look taller. Just like the vehicles, sets in Star Wars all went through a multi-tiered design process. Concept designers at ILM would do numerous renderings of possible looks for each environment, from which George Lucas would pick a direction. More renderings would be done to refine that look, and then go to Elstree Studios in England, where the art department would do detailed schematics of the sections of the environment that would actually be built on stage. Storyboarding is the art of translating a film script into a series of images that represent each shot to be filmed. Depending on the director and style of the movie, a single scene could take one storyboard or hundreds. In the case of the Star Wars saga, which involved so many special effects, locations, and camera tricks, thousands of storyboards were created. As the script was edited and pre-production progressed, many scenes were altered or cut, requiring new boards to be drawn and old ones discarded. This collection of boards by Joe Johnston feature many omitted ideas from the Empire Strikes Back Battle of Hoth sequence. In particular, note the Mobius-style headgear on the snowspeeder pilots and the appearance of Boba Fett in the Rebel snow trenches. Before the dawn of computer animation, effects artists had to create clever ways to bring creatures and giant robots to life. One of the most successful techniques is known as stop-motion animation, most famously used by the great Ray Harryhausen on films such as Clash of the Titans and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Animator Phil Tippett created some of the most astonishing stop-motion effects ever put on film for Empire Strikes Back, both with the Tauntaun and the AT-AT sequences. The final scenes were produced using detailed miniature puppets, models, landscapes, and background paintings, painstakingly moving every articulated joint of the puppets one small increment per frame of film. The amount of movement would be measured by using a series of gauges, such as the one featured in the center of this room. In addition to all of the artistry needed to create these elements, Tippett created hundreds of pages of sketches and notes to perfect the sequence of movements and walk cycles. He studied the lumbering walks of elephants to create the imperial walker's stride, and made extensive notes on the combined movements of a horse and rider for the tauntaun shots. This is a selection of originals, prototypes, and production samples created by artist Greg Aronowitz for Legends in 3 Dimensions as a Lucasfilm licensee. Greg started his career in collectibles doing garage kits, unlicensed underground model kits. Lucasfilm liked the sculpture so much that they granted his company, L3D, an official license to produce and sell the products as finished, painted collectibles. A few of these prototypes were never produced, such as the bust of Admiral Akbar. The original sculpture is the only one that exists. The partial Cantina scene was the first prototype for an expanding collection of the entire Cantina that would be sold through the Hamilton Collection in 1998. Although mailers went out to solicit sales for the product, the project was canceled when the distribution company was purchased by a larger entity. Before 3D modeling and printing, action figures and collectibles were sculpted by hand in materials such as wax and clay. Because some figures would be produced at a very small size, like Kenner's die-cast Action Master series, artists would create the originals at a larger scale, which would then be reduced by a process called panographing. This process involved a machine that would run a steel needle along the surface of a urethane casting of the original sculpture, like the one featured here. And then a series of gears would calculate the reduction and move the cutter along a dense material to mill a smaller version. This then would be molded so the final production versions could be cast. Between the completion of the original trilogy and the release of the highly anticipated prequels, fans were hungry for more adventures in a galaxy far, far away. Lucas obliged with a series of spin-off projects, including Saturday morning cartoons and multiple TV movies, such as The Ewok Adventure. This art was created by Kazuhiko Sano, also known for illustrating the beautiful Return of the Jedi style B poster. Merchandise has always been synonymous with Star Wars. Ever since Kenner sold the Early Bird Special, an empty cardboard box with a certificate promising action figures at a future date. Fans who kept their 1977 boxes intact have an invaluable prized possession today, sought after by collectors worldwide. Clearly, packaging is as important to the brand as the product itself, and has opened a channel for more amazing Star Wars art. This collection is packaging art by the legendary Struzan for Legends in 3 Dimensions, a collectible sculpture house helmed by Greg Aronowitz, a Hollywood artist and the curator of this museum. Drew created the initial composition to present to Lucasfilms for approval before doing the final illustrations. The only note he received was to remove the lightsaber hanging off the belt, because George Lucas felt that Greg, quote, wasn't a Jedi yet. Merchandise has always been synonymous with Star Wars. Ever since Kenner sold the Early Bird Special, an empty cardboard box with a certificate promising action figures at a future date. Fans who kept their 1977 boxes intact have an invaluable prized possession today, sought after by collectors worldwide. Clearly, packaging is as important to the brand as the product itself, and has opened a channel for more amazing Star Wars art. This collection is packaging art by the legendary Struzan for Legends in 3 Dimensions, a collectible sculpture house helmed by Greg Aronowitz, a Hollywood artist and the curator of this museum. Drew created the initial composition to present to Lucasfilms for approval before doing the final illustrations. The only note he received was to remove the lightsaber hanging off the belt, because George Lucas felt that Greg, quote, wasn't a Jedi yet.